The time has come to announce to the inner sphere and to ourselves that we are Capellans, to remind our enemies that we are worthy of their respect, to remind our children that we are worthy of their honor. The time has come for us, a united Capellan nation, to retake our primacy of place from the ghosts that plague us, to again toe the line and declare our existence. We must, like the fabled phoenix, rise again. Qin Sheng, Chancellor Sun Tzu Liao. It would come as no surprise to anyone with a basic understanding of Inner Sphere history when I say that the Capellan Confederation spent most of its existence as the beleaguered underdog. The realm of House Liao controlled fewer worlds, struggled to maintain control of access to resources, and seemed to always exist between one existential threat and another. The Capellan people have faced a wide variety of hardships, including brutal warfare, living under an oppressive command economy, and had to take the knee to a series of unstable or flat-out unhinged leaders who treated them like worthless pawns on a chessboard. Other than that, it's a pretty nice place. By the end of the Third Succession War, the Capellan Confederation was dealing with some very serious logistics and manufacturing issues. It didn't help that the Celestial Throne was in the hands of Maximilian Liao, who only had a very tentative grasp on reality at the best of times. To put it bluntly, he definitely wasn't getting any more sane as the years passed. One of the consequences of the turbulent few years between the Third and Fourth Succession Wars was a renewed effort to take the scrambled and fractured industrial capacity of the Confederation and task it with rebuilding their military might. The biggest challenge was that the major production lines for battlemechs were incomplete due to the loss of planets or just the obliteration of production lines in raids and defensive operations. While never a powerhouse battlemech producer, the Capellans could at least partially keep up with mech production from their neighbors. Now, as a result of heavy fighting, fewer complete machines could be cobbled together from A to Z. What good would a production line that produces the legs of a marauder be if they couldn't make the rest of the mech? What good is a torso assembly of another mech without arms? It was a heck of a problem for the Capellan logistics officers who faced the threat of severe punishment from the Celestial Throne if they didn't sort it all out. Short of completely retooling production lines, which could take months, years, and resources the state didn't have, they had to find a way. The solution was unorthodox and pretty ingenious. Looking at all the different production lines, designers identified the possibility that all of these parts from different mechs could be made to fit together. This moonshot plan resulted in the assembly of modified parts from a Marauder, Phoenix Hawk, Shadowhawk, and a litany of other parts originally destined for other machines. Once all the fiber optic lines, myomer cables, and ammunition feed lines were sorted out, the resulting Franken mech was designated the CTF-1X Cataphract. The name was chosen in reference to the notoriously effective mounted heavy cavalry deployed by the Persians back on ancient Terra. With both horse and rider covered in scale and chain armor, the Cataphracts could survive substantial incoming fire from archers, light-thrown spears, and most other common projectiles of the age. The team at Earthworks intended to create a 70-ton battle mech that could not just take substantial amounts of fire, but also dish it out in equal amounts. For official documentation, the chassis of the Cataphract 1X was labeled an Earthworks CTF, though as we just covered, it was the end result of meshing multiple different pieces into one frame. It was wrapped around a Vox 280 fusion engine, which allowed the Cataphract to run up to 64 km per hour. It lacked jump jets, but did carry 11 tons of Callan Royal Star standard plate armor, which offered 176 points of protection. For comparison across other common 70-ton mechs, the Grasshopper 5H carried 13 tons of armor, the Guillotine 4L carried 12 tons, and the Warhammer 6R also carried just 10. So among company, the Cataphract was closer to the lighter armor end of the spectrum, but it's not a very big gap. With all the usual parts like cockpit assembly, gyro, and 16 single heat sinks, the remaining mass could be devoted to weaponry like the right arm-mounted Ceres Arms Smasher particle projection cannon, a Sarlon Maxicannon AC-10 autocannon mounted in the right torso along with 1 ton of ammunition, and 4 standard Ceres Arms medium lasers scattered between the arms and side torsos. The 2 side torso medium lasers face the rear firing arc because not everything has to make sense, especially when the Celestial Throne is involved. As most fire now turned on the upright pillager, Eris raced his wraith forward at best speed to worry the flank of the fallen pillager now attempting to stand. Between his pulse laser fire and the shotgun effect cluster rounds from the Daidachi Cataphract, the pillager was thrown off balance again and crashed back to the earth. The second assault machine made a successful retreat back around the corner of the factory building, but not before surrendering at least 4 more tons of armor to the regulators. As suddenly as the violence began, it was over. The Killing Fields, page 209, by Lauren L. Coleman. Once all was said and cobbled together, the CTF-1X was an unusual-looking but effective battle mech. At least it was from the Capellan standards of the 3020s when they couldn't produce any mechs heavier than the Vindicator. Something was better than nothing, so plans were approved to begin production centered on lines on Tikhonov. For fans of the events of the Fourth Succession War, this won't be a surprise, but Tikhonov was a terrible place to build a new Capellan heavy battle mech. As though in the know, well, already know, or else they wouldn't be in the know, Hans Davion announced the conquest of the Capellan Confederation to his bride Melissa Steiner at their wedding on Terra. Operation Rat began during the wedding ceremony, including assaults against multiple systems including Tikhonov, where the Cataphracts were rolling off of their production lines. In the cruel twist of fate, the battle mech that was supposed to revitalize the Capellan war machine ended up reinforcing their enemies. House Davion units passing through the system ended up adding the Cataphract to their stocks, and then used it against future Capellan targets. This included the Crucis Lancers and later on the St. Ives Lancers, when the St. Ives Compact made its move to separate from the rest of the Confederation. The unfortunate fate of the Cataphract project contributed to Maximilian Liao's declining mental health and ultimate removal of power by his daughter Romano. Following her own villain arc after becoming Chancellor and purging all of her possible enemies, Romano swapped out her Highlander for one of the new Earthworks CTF-1X Cataphracts. Now, I'm a fan of the Cataphract, but even I have trouble wrapping my brain around that decision. I know she was already half crazy, but there's crazy and then there's crazy. Anyway, we're just going to go along with it and see what happens. Romano's Cataphract was a stock 1X and one from the earliest production runs with all of its expected hiccups, bugs, and gremlins. Apparently that didn't dissuade the Chancellor, and she kept the mech until she was shuffled from the mortal coil in 3052 thanks to the machinations of Candace Liao. The most disturbing part of this specific Cataphract story is that it never saw traditional combat, as Romano wasn't that sort of leader. Instead, she used the battle mech in official state functions, propaganda, and most depressingly, executions of her ever-available political enemies. If you were lucky, you could be instantly vaporized by a PPC, but Romano was not above just stepping on the condemned. One bright spot from Romano's tenure at the helm of the Capellan Confederation was that her brutal reorganization of the Confederation's industrial state allowed for the production of new Cataphracts by 3032. Before he could call for help or withdraw, a hulking shadow moved into his peripheral vision. Glancing to the right, he saw a Cataphract, the triangular Macaron's armored cavalry crest painted just below its outthrust cockpit, unleash a blast of autocannon fire at the enemy mech. The Cauldron-born staggered under the hammering impact, recovered its balance, and showered the Cataphract with missiles and autocannon shells. Before the smoke of its volley cleared, the Light Horse Omnimech began walking backward, deeper into the spaceport, alternating its fire between the two Capellan mechs besetting it. Cristobal knew that despite the clan-designated mech's inherent toughness, the Cauldron-born must eventually fall or flee. Daggerpoint, page 165, by Thomas S. Gressman. One of the earliest refits for the Cataphract showed up in the timeline in 3027, just 2 years after the mech's introduction. It was a reflection of some of the input from mech warriors who wanted a tougher design that could last longer in the field. The CTF-2X Cataphract dropped 2 of the single heat sinks in favor of 2 additional tons of armor, bringing the total on the 2X to 13. Additionally, the mech's PPC was swapped out for a large laser in the same arm. A second ton of ammunition was added to the AC-10, and the 2 arm-mounted medium lasers were sacrificed in favor of an SRM-4 launcher in the left arm fed by 1 ton of ammunition. While these changes did create a better brawler at short range, the 2X's mech warrior did need to protect its left torso from taking excessive fire, lest that 3 tons of ammunition turn the mech into a recreation of your unemployed friend's curiously unlimited firework budget backyard party on July 13th. Like with the 1X, the Cataphract 2X required only moderate heat management skills in normal use. However, in that perfect moment when you really do want to give your opponent something to think about, an Alpha Strike would leave the mech at 8+ into the red while on the run. Not great, but also not horrifying. One of the more notable Cataphract 2X mech warriors was Sergeant Major George Lytton, who worked for McKinnon's Raiders, otherwise known as the Fox's Teeth. The Lytton family were longtime members of the unit, and when George lost his Warhammer to accumulated wear and tear, it was replaced by one of the early 2X Cataphracts, claimed as salvage by the 7th Crucis Lancers on Tikhonov during the 4th Succession War. Later, Lytton's 2X was upgraded with experimental and prototype parts, including an ER large laser and double heat sinks. The Black Hills security mech teetered back, unbalanced and on the edge of falling, when Kim San-Lee's Cataphract hammered in with its light and medium-weight autocannon. Exploiting the Enforcer's ruined armor, the 40mm slugs and 80mm fragmenting rounds he fired tore at the mech with the savage force of a jungle cat eviscerating its prey. The cluster-round shrapnel carved away at internal supports, engine shielding, and the ammunition bin for the Enforcer's autocannon. The ammo went off in a series of hard-hitting detonations, ripping apart the Enforcer and freeing the fusion reactor. Golden flame lanced out, scarring the second Fedrat mechs as the first ended its usefulness in an explosion that filled the tunnel with fire and flying parts and equipment. Illusions of Victory, page 96, by Lauren L. Coleman. With the Federated Suns in control of the Earthworks production line on Tikhonov and the Capellan's backup line on Grand Base, the history of the Cataphract variants branches with differing development paths. The Davion saw the potential of an updated Cataphract for use against the clans in the Lyran half of the Federated Commonwealth in an all-hands-on-deck scenario. The resulting CTF-3D was first produced in late 3050, and it reflected the desperate, throw-everything-you-have-at the problem and see if it works mentality of the Inner Sphere at that point in the timeline. Starting from the ground up, the installation of an extra-light 280 GM fusion engine shaved off 8 tons of mass for use elsewhere. The original movement profile was pushed to 464 with the addition of 4 jump jets, granting the Cataphract the ability to leap up to 120 meters. The 4 standard medium lasers from the original 1X were left in place, including the 2 rear-facing side-torso pair, but the rest of the loadout was improved with the remaining 4 tons of mass from the XL engine. The PPC and the AC-10 were pulled in favor of a Mydron XL LB-10X autocannon and a General Motors Nova 5 Ultra AC-5 autocannon. The LB-10X offered improved flexibility and accuracy while actually saving mass over the original AC-10. Its 2 tons of ammunition were stored in the left torso along with case to protect the Mechwarrior from ammunition explosions and the complete demolition of the battlemech in an unplanned rapid ammunition expenditure situation. The UAC-5 was placed into the right arm, and its 1 ton of ammunition was stored in the right torso along with its own dedicated case. While technically more powerful and definitely more agile, the Cataphract 3D is also more vulnerable to being disabled thanks to that extra light engine without any additional armor coverage. A Gauss rifle slug or a hit from a clan ERPPC to either side left the 3D with just a single point of armor remaining before those engine criticals were on the table. While useful as a mid and long-range weapon, the UAC-5 represents a massive 10.5 tons of mass once you factor in the case and the ammunition. That's a big investment for either 5 or possibly 10 damage if double tapped. One of the original goals for the Cataphract was to create a tough battlemech. I'm not sure that the extra light engine in the Cataphract 3D makes that mission possible. Let's see if the Capellans can do any better. Cataphract 3L was also introduced in 3050, and though it shared some similarities with the Davion upgrade thanks to some stolen plans, it went a different direction with some key components. Once again, an extra light fusion engine was installed to free up 8 tons of space, but instead of using 4 of those on jump jets, a mask system was installed into the left torso to offer the Mechwarrior the opportunity to boost the movement profile up to 480 in short bursts. The traditional 16 heatsinks from the 1X were upgraded to the double-strength variety to facilitate the installation of an ERPPC in the right arm and 4 medium pulse lasers split between the arms and side torsos. Once again, the 2 side torso lasers were set to face the rear firing arc. Finally, an LB-10X autocannon was installed into the right torso and fed by 2 tons of ammunition in the same location. Heat generation isn't an issue for the 3L, as a full Alpha Strike while on the run left the mech at only 3+ into the red. Without the two rear-facing lasers, the mech is Alpha Strike heat negative. Overall, the Cataphract 3L was a decent, useful at all ranges battle mech that could still use its mask to get where it's going at the right moment. Of course, the XL engine means it has the same increased vulnerability of the 3D variant, but in this case I think it might be closer to being worth the risk, partially because that ERPPC is just a clearly superior weapon in comparison to the UAC-5. Additionally, the side torsos are packed with double heatsinks, medium pulse lasers, the mask, and the LB-10X, which makes me a little less fussy about that Inner Sphere XL engine. While I would in no way suggest the 3L or 3D were cataphracts in their ideal form, they were both good faith efforts. At least they weren't crammed with ER large lasers just for the heck of it. The Cataphract tried to brush away its attackers, but the agile suits evaded its clumsy attempts. They tore at its armor, ripping large holes in it, then pumping energy from the right arm-mounted small lasers into the rents. When the heavy mech attempted to flee, Li Win popped 2 more anti-mech squads, one of which made a successful kneecapping attempt. The unarmored infantry melted back into the desert floor, while the battlesuits rode the toppled Cataphract to the ground. 70 tons of battle mech impacting the earth sent a tremor through the ground that Li found extremely satisfying. The Killing Fields, page 143, by Lauren L. Coleman. When George Lytton fell on Wotan fighting the Jade Falcons in 3051, his special refit Cataphract was also nearly destined for the history books. Thankfully, it was salvaged and refit by his daughter Sarah Lytton, who tricked it out with the latest and greatest tech going into the 3060s. Her specialized Cataphract was designated the CTF-3X, and it's our next official variant. Since it was based on the 2X platform and not a Helm refit, the engine for the 3X remained a standard. It also lacked jump jets, but it did however have 14 double heatsinks, and its armor was completely swapped out for 12 tons of ferrofibrous, which provided 215 points of protection. And with that, we're left with weapons and gear. The star of the show was a rotary AC-5 autocannon in the right torso, which was fed by 3 tons of case-protected ammunition. Paired with it in the right arm was an ER large laser which could do its 8 damage out to 19 hexes. At mid-range, 2 ER medium lasers were split between the side torsos facing the front firing arc. Finally, a Streak SRM-4 launcher was installed into the left arm, which was fed by a single ton of case-protected ammunition in the left torso. Well armored and capable of hitting consistently hard, the only major sacrifice the CTF-3X had to make was its lack of agility and speed. It was a lumbering threat, but a potent one. It comes dangerously close to hitting the buttons for being my nomination for the Cataphract in its ideal form. To Cristobal, it seemed that Arai had failed to notice the flames and heat. Instead, the heavy mech's torso rotated a few degrees to the left. A tongue of flame, a meter long, leapt from the machine's side, as Arai unleashed the Mydron dual-purpose autocannon mounted just above the Cataphract's right hip. Cristobal briefly glimpsed the shape of an enforcer bearing the crest of the 2nd Blackwell Lancers through the falling rain. Arai's burst of cannon fire laced the gangly mech's torso and arms. Then a gust of wind drove the cold rain into Cristobal's face. By the time his vision cleared, the enemy machine had vanished. Dagger Point, page 15, by Thomas S. Gressman. In 3067, the resurgent Capellans proved they were no longer messing around with the production of the CTF-4L Cataphract, which embraced several new pieces of technology for the first time. It's odd that it took this long, but endosteel was finally used to shave off 3.5 tons of mass while the standard 280 fusion engine was left alone. There were no jump jets, but it was wrapped in 13.5 tons of stealth armor, which when combined with the 4L's left torso Guardian ECM suite, makes this our first Operation Sneaky Sneak Cataphract. Finally, 13 double heatsinks round out the structural hardware for this stompy boy. The Cataphract 4L's primary weapons were an ERPPC set into the right arm and a Gauss rifle set into the right torso, which was protected by case. The rifle was given 2 tons of ammunition, which was deemed adequate for most engagements. Besides the previously mentioned Guardian ECM in the left torso, the last additions were a pair of ER medium lasers set into the left arm. The combination of plentiful stealth armor and the ECM made the Cataphract 4L tough to take down before it got to where it wanted to be to cause some havoc. That's why the design was embraced by Sun Tzu Liao's Shadowlance units. The 4L was so valued that when the Capellans retook Tikhonov, the existing 3D variant production line was retooled to produce the 4L. Our next Cataphract was the personal refit owned by Colonel Naomi Centrella, also Magistrix of the Magistracy of Canopus in 3070. During the fighting against the Word of Blake in the Cian system in September of 3070, Centrella led the 3rd Canopian Fusiliers from the cockpit of her Cataphract, which was given the designation CTF-5MOC, sometimes just known as the Naomi. The 5MOC took advantage of an extra light engine, compact gyro, 4 jump jets, and carried 15 double heat sinks. Similar to the 4L, the 5MOC was protected by 13.5 tons of stealth armor. The Naomi's primary weapon was a heavy PPC set into the right torso, which could do 15 damage out to 18 hexes. At just a slightly shorter range, the right arm sported a brand new plasma rifle, which was fed by 2 tons of ammunition. From here, things start to go off the rails with the inclusion of 4 rocket launcher 10 racks split evenly between the side torsos. These one-shot weapons could reach out to 18 hexes. At mid-range and closer, an ER medium laser in the right arm added its valuable and consistent damage, and at close range, a medium pulse laser in the left torso could aid the fun as well. Finally, an ER small laser located in the head provided the warmth and comfort that only thousands of degrees of directed radiation can produce. The last of the doodads on the mech was a Guardian ECM suite added to the center torso. All of this together suggests the Cataphract 5MOC was a solid infiltrator design that could do a significant amount of damage in a short time span, and then of course scurry off before facing any consequences for it. That Naomi Centrella was a wily one. Denikin's mech executed a half bow as he tried to bring the dual-purpose autocannon into play. The ground pounders were too close. They swarmed up the Cataphract's back-acting legs. Lowry looked on in helpless horror. She could not fire on the infantryman without hitting the mech itself. Denikin swatted one trooper away with a clenched steel fist, but then time ran out for the Legion vet. The infantryman dropped away and dashed off into the night. Lowry felled one with a laser blast just as a pair of loud explosions tore through the Cataphract's reverse knee joints. Denikin's machine sagged, the mangled right knee giving way as the mech toppled. The Cataphract thrust out its arms, trying to catch itself. The Dying Time, page 231, by Thomas S. Gressman. The next Cataphract variant in the timeline was the CTF-3LL, and it arrived in 3068. The 3LL was an evolution of the Capellan 3L design with its XL engine and integrated mask system. 16 double heat sinks and 11 tons of standard armor rounded out the design structure. The major difference between the 3L and the 3LL was a removal of the right arm-mounted ERPPC in favor of a plasma rifle in the same location, fed by 3 tons of ammunition. The right torso LB-10X autocannon in the right torso was left untouched and was fed by 2 tons of its ammo. The 2 rear-facing medium pulse lasers were left in place in the side torsos, but the 2 front-facing lasers were swapped out for a pair of ER mediums. The heat curve for the 3LL was very manageable, as even firing the rear pulse lasers in an alpha strike while running was heat neutral. If anything, it was slightly oversynced. As much as I want to like the Cataphract 3LL, the 11 tons of standard armor with an XL engine irks me to no end. It was fine on the 3D, even the 3L, I accepted it, but here we are in the 3060s and we're still looking at that. Even a modest sacrifice of the 2 rear-facing medium pulse lasers down to the ER variety would free up 2 additional tons of armor that could bulk up those side torsos. I don't ask for much, BattleTech Santa. Can you bring me that? I've been good. Okay, I've been wanting to be good. I was in the vicinity of good. Let's just move on. As if to celebrate the revival of New Syrtis once it was back in Federated Sun's control, the AFFS had quite a few broken and parted out Capellan Cataphracts laying around. This included a good number of CTF-3LLs, which we just finished fawning over. Not wanting to pass up on the opportunity to rub the Capellans' noses in it, the AFFS were able to cobble together a small number of what was designated the CTF-5D. It looked similar in weapons loadout, but had the Davion flare and some Lyran razzle-dazzle in the form of a light fusion engine. The Capellan elements are there in the form of 12 tons of stealth armor and the plasma rifle, but it also has the Davion fluff, such as 6 improved jump jets which push the movement profile for the mech up to 466. The other interesting structural change was the use of a small cockpit to allow for that plasma rifle to be installed directly into the mech's head. This, ladies and gentlemen, boys and squirrels, cephalopods and arachnids, is our first documented case of an emotional support plasma rifle. I should get some fireworks. Hey editing team, when we get to this point, add some fireworks. Yeah, that's it. That's what's called high quality production value, folks. Soak it in. Once we get past the moneymaker, the light AC-5 autocannon set into the right arm offered its 5 damage per shot out to 15 hexes, which matched the range profile with the plasma rifle. At just slightly shorter range, a pair of ER medium lasers split between the right arm and right torso could provide some good reliable damage. And finally, a Guardian ECM system in the left torso allowed the mech to fill the enemy's sensors with garbage. The 14 double heat sinks were way more than enough to handle the alpha strikes and even leaping the full 6 hexes with the improved jump jets. The case in the right torso prevented the light AC-5 ammo from doing too much damage to the mech in the case of a rapid, unplanned disassembly event of that right arm. There's a lot going on with the CTF-5D, but from what we've covered so far, I think it makes a pretty strong argument for the Cataphract in its ideal form. It sets a very high bar with its tough exterior, agility, and only really stumbles in its overall damage output. The final 2 official Cataphract variants better step up their game. Both men fired their weapons at the same time, but this time Wu's aim wasn't so flawless. Both pulse lasers tracked low, evaporating hunks of ferrocrete instead of armor, but the PPC was right on target. The jagged beam exploded the armor plates off Yenlo Wang's right arm, tracing a blackened scar from elbow to shoulder. The autocannon in the right side of the mech's chest whined loudly as it spat out a hail of projectiles. Most of the hits ground away at the already damaged armor on the Centurion's center torso, while some chipped the armor on the mech's left breast. Assumption of Risk, page 239 by Michael A. Stackpole. The next to last official Cataphract in our timeline is the CTF-5L, and it was first spotted in 3132. The 5L, another Capellan design, took advantage of endosteel, an extra-light gyro, an extra-light engine, 12 double heat sinks, and was protected by 13.5 tons of reflective armor. It lacked jump jets, but instead spent its saved mass on a couple of heavy-hitting weapons and backup gear. The right torso Gauss rifle was wrapped in case and fed by 2 tons of ammunition. Its range was slightly beaten by the right arm-mounted ERPPC. Surprisingly, 2 standard medium lasers made their return to the design back in their traditional rear arc firing positions. Finally, 2 small variable speed pulse lasers were split between the left and right arms. The 12 double heat sinks have no issue handling the mech under general use, and only under the most extreme close-range alpha strike scenarios is heat management necessary. Technically, a full alpha strike at close range while on the run left the 5L at 6+ heat into the red, which isn't terrible for the prospect of doing up to 45 damage. Overall, it was a lot of fuss and expensive upgrades for not much fire and fury. Can the last official variant carry the day? Let's find out. The Cataphract 5LL was a subvariant of that 5L that showed up in 3135 as a tweak to the original that added 4 jump jets at the cost of a couple of heat sinks and jumbled close-range weaponry. The Gauss rifle and ERPPC were left alone, but the 2 variable speed pulse lasers were swapped out for a pair of standard mediums. While more agile thanks to the 4 jump jets, heat is much more of an issue with just 10 double heat sinks to keep the mech cool. ERPPCing while jumping very nearly set the mech into the red. Adding the Gauss rifle is heat neutral, but any of the medium lasers added to the attack will send it over into the red 3 at a time. Overall, the choice between the 5L and the 5LL Cataphracts boils down to how badly you want jump jets. Once you sort out that important life choice, you're good to go. Unfortunately, I don't think either of these newer variants matches the impact and fun of the older 5D variant, and not just because of the plasma rifle. The 1-2 punch of Gauss rifle and ERPPC is nice, but there's not much else going on for these expensive variants. But that's just my humble opinion. Now, before we get all nostalgic, I did want to take a crack at creating my own totally non-canon and unofficial Cataphract. Designated the CTF-5MF, I wanted to take the 5D to a new level, with the addition of some clan technology. The rationale for it stems from the chaotic St. Ives region following the victories of Alaric's Wolf Empire against the Capellans. This meshing of inner sphere and clan technology promised both fun and a very warm encounter for all who experience it. The CTF-5MF has a standard structure wrapped around a Clan Tech grade 280XL Fusion engine. The 466 movement profile from the 5D is preserved with its improved jump jets, but the armor was swapped over to 14 tons of standard plate. 14 inner sphere double heat sinks will be put to work trying to keep this monster cool. Good luck. I was so enamored by the actuator enhancement system for the Clint MF that I decided to employ it again on the Cataphract. The tech was installed into the right arm along with the snub-nosed particle projection cannon. Already an accurate weapon, the additional -1 improvement to its aim is attractive. In the right torso, a plasma rifle was installed and fed by 2 tons of its inert ammunition stored in the center torso. Sharing the plasma rifle's range profile, 3 clan-grade ER medium lasers round out the mech's weaponry. They were placed into the left arm, left torso, and right arm. That third laser also benefits from the AES's accuracy boost. The loadout for the 5MF leans toward mid and short-range combat, especially at that 10 hex range and closer when all the weapons are in their medium range and that snub-nosed PPC is on the verge of hitting its short range with its full damage at 9 hexes. The improved jump jets allow the mech to close quickly with targets over a wide variety of terrain features, and heat generation is only a slight issue with the 14 double heat sinks. A full alpha strike while on the run leaves the 5MF at 9+ heat into the red, which could be a little worrisome, but when the time is right, it's right. You can always hold off on the plasma rifle or an ER medium laser, and then things aren't quite so bad. If you'd like to give the Cataphract 5MF a try, I've included a free PDF record sheet for it in the video notes below. Come back and let me know how it does. So why do we love the Cataphract? As is so often the case, the most interesting battle mechs in the universe are fun not due to their weaponry or even their look, but due to their role in telling the story about the events and narrative. We're more interested in a battle mech built out of a desperate need to survive than one produced to make a profit. We appreciate a mech with its flaws that tell an interesting tale over one that is built without fault, but lacking panache. We love the Cataphract because it's a cobbled together mess of seemingly incompatible parts and then stolen by the Davions. It's a conduit for telling the story of the Capellans during a period of time when they were arguably at their lowest and most likely to be wiped out completely if not for the tenacious and stubborn response of the people. The Capellans might be seen as the perennial underdogs, but they sure can build a battle mech. The Cataphract is a solid entry in the 70-ton battle mech pantheon, and for the most part the mech improves with age and new technology. While I personally found the most recent variants to be pretty lackluster, at least they have some personality. In-universe, the Cataphract is respected and desired on both sides of the Liao and Davion border, and even elsewhere. It even inspired the Caesar, a battle mech we'll need to cover sometime soon on the channel. I'm also horribly biased because other than the Founder Pult, I spent most of my MWO time in a Cataphract in various silly configurations. But I'm curious what you think. Is the Cataphract a good mech that makes it onto your table, or do you shun it in a betrayal of Capellan Juche? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you as always for coming by as we talked BattleTech, and thank you to those from the MechFrog Discord who shared their painted mech minis. We had a ton of submissions this week and that's great. If you want to join us, I've included a link to the Discord server in the video notes below. If you enjoyed the video and feel it's worthy, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up and even hitting the subscribe button, as it will make it much more likely you'll see my nonsense in the future. For those who have taken the extra step of becoming channel members or supported on Ko-fi, thank you. Without you, none of this would be possible. Until we meet again, please take care of yourself and your loved ones by making this world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.